In 1967, Israeli paratroopers reached the Western Wall for the first time in 2,000 years. Their commander radioed 3 words that shook the nation. The Temple Mount is in our hands. But within hours, Defense Minister Moshe Dayan made a decision that still haunts Israel. He handed control back to Islamic authorities. Today, that decision creates an impossible problem. Jewish rabbis say their temple must be rebuilt on that exact mountain, not nearby, not somewhere else. That specific spot where Abraham offered Isaac, where Solomon's temple stood, where Muslims now pray at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Any attempt to change this triggers war. Yet in secret locations across Jerusalem, everything needed for the temple already exists. The question isn't if it will be built. The question is how they'll clear the mountain without starting World War III. Before we go deeper, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notification so you won't miss what's coming next. Now here's why that 1967 decision still matters today. The Torah is clear. The temple can only be rebuilt in one location, Mount Moriah in Jerusalem. This isn't a suggestion or a preference. It's a divine command that's been passed down for 3,000 years. Rabbi Chaim Richman from the Temple Institute put it simply, rebuilding the temple isn't optional. It's a spiritual obligation that doesn't depend on governments. This is the same mountain where Abraham nearly sacrificed Isaac, where King David purchased land for an altar, where Solomon built the first temple that stood for 400 years, where the second temple stood until Romans destroyed it in 70 AD. According to Jewish faith, this is the exact point where heaven touches earth. But there's a massive problem. At the top of Mount Moriah stand 2 of Islam's most important structures, the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. Muslims call this place Haram al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary. It's the 3rd holiest site in Islam, after Mecca and Medina. Over 1 billion Muslims consider it sacred ground. Islamic tradition teaches that Muhammad ascended to heaven from this spot. For 1,300 years, Muslims have prayed here. The Golden Dome of the Rock dominates Jerusalem's skyline. Touch it, and you touch the pride of the entire Muslim world. Turkish President Erdogan made this clear in 2021. Jerusalem belongs to Islam. Al-Aqsa Mosque is our red line. If Israel touches a single stone, the Muslim world will rise as one. The former Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh was even more direct. If Jews dare approach the Temple Mount to rebuild their temple, we will open the gates of hell. Every time an Israeli official even visits the site, riots break out. In 2022, clashes erupted after Israeli police entered the mosque compound. Hundreds were injured. The violence spread across Gaza and the West Bank within hours. Dennis Ross, former U.S. State Department advisor, warned, "There is no other place on earth where a single action can trigger a global conflict like the Temple Mount." Think about that. 35 acres that could ignite a war involving billions of people. 2 religions. 1 mountain. Both claim God gave it to them. Both refuse to compromise. So how does this get resolved? Israeli scientists say nature might solve it first, and what they've discovered about the ground beneath those mosques should terrify anyone who understands earthquakes. Jerusalem sits on a ticking time bomb, literally. The city rests directly above the Jordan Valley Fault, part of the massive Dead Sea Transform system. This geological fracture runs from Syria through the Jordan Valley all the way to the Red Sea, and it cuts right beneath the Temple Mount. Professor Avi Shapira, former director of Israel's Geophysical Institute, has been warning about this for years. In his 2023 report, he stated the region is overdue for a major seismic event. Historical records prove Jerusalem isn't safe from catastrophic earthquakes. In 31 BC, a massive quake destroyed Jericho and severely damaged Jerusalem. Historian Josephus recorded that thousands died. In 749 AD, another earthquake devastated the region. Byzantine chronicles describe walls cracking across the Temple Mount. Buildings collapsed throughout the city. More recently, in 1927, a 6.2 magnitude earthquake struck near the Dead Sea. It destroyed structures in Nablus and damaged buildings in Jerusalem's Old City. Over 500 people died across the region. Scientists have studied the pattern. Major earthquakes hit this fault line every 100 to 130 years. We're now 97 years past the last one. Dr. Shmuel Marco, a geophysicist at Tel Aviv University, published research showing the Temple Mount sits on fractured bedrock. Centuries of tunneling beneath the mountain have weakened the ground even further. The plateau isn't solid rock. It's a network of underground chambers, ancient cisterns, and passages carved over thousands of years. The Al-Aqsa Mosque was built in 705 AD, the Dome of the Rock in 691 AD. Neither structure has modern seismic reinforcement. They've stood for over 1,300 years, but they weren't designed to withstand the forces of a major earthquake. Engineer Eli Shukron spent 20 years excavating around the Temple Mount. His warning is blunt. If an earthquake of magnitude 6.5 or higher hits Jerusalem, the ancient buildings on the mount won't survive. The walls will crack, the foundations will shift. Collapse is inevitable. Modern building codes in Israel require earthquake-resistant construction, but you can't retrofit 1,300-year-old religious monuments without completely rebuilding them, and any attempt to renovate the Islamic structures would spark immediate violence. So the buildings remain vulnerable. Seismologists monitor the region constantly. Small tremors occur regularly, most too minor to feel, but each one releases a tiny amount of pressure, or builds it up for something bigger. In 2004, a moderate earthquake in the Dead Sea region sent cracks through buildings in Jerusalem. Nothing collapsed, but engineers surveyed the damage. Their conclusion? The city isn't prepared for the big one. And here's what makes this scenario unique. If an earthquake destroys the Al-Aqsa Mosque, Israel can't be blamed. No military strike, no political decision, no provocation, just nature. The Muslim world would mourn. The structures are irreplaceable, but they couldn't declare war on geology. Israeli rabbis have said publicly they believe God will clear the mountain himself. Rabbi Yisrael Ariel stated in 2022, "The Eternal One will prepare the place. What is an obstacle today will become dust. We won't need weapons or wars." Some call this wishful thinking. Others call it prophecy, but geologists call it probability. The question isn't if another major earthquake hits Jerusalem. Cliffhanger. The question is when, and what happens the day after. Because there's a second scenario already unfolding. One involving military forces positioning around Israel right now, and the prophecy describing it was written 2,600 years ago. The prophet Ezekiel wrote about a massive invasion of Israel. Chapters 38 and 39 describe a coalition of nations from the north attacking the Jewish state. He named the leader Gog, from the land of Magog. For centuries, scholars debated what this meant. Today, they're watching it happen in real time. Russia maintains a permanent military presence in Syria, just north of Israel. Iran has positioned militias and weapons throughout the region. Turkey's President Erdogan regularly threatens to liberate Jerusalem. These three powers, along with their allies, form an arc of influence surrounding Israel. In 2024, Israeli intelligence reports tracked increased military coordination between Moscow, Tehran, and Ankara. Joint exercises, weapons transfers, strategic planning sessions. Ron Ben Yishai, a veteran Israeli defense analyst, warned, "The next regional war won't be like previous conflicts. This will involve multiple state actors with a unified objective. The target? Jerusalem." Zechariah 12:3 prophesied this exact scenario. "On that day I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all nations. All who try to lift it will injure themselves." Here's what makes this scenario dangerous for the Temple Mount. Modern warfare doesn't respect holy sites. Precision munitions malfunction. Drones miscalculate targets. In urban combat, buildings become casualties regardless of their religious significance. In 2023, during escalated tensions, several rockets fired from Gaza landed near the Old City. One struck within 200 meters of the Temple Mount. Israeli Iron Dome interceptors shot down others directly above the holy site. It was luck, not planning, that prevented a direct hit. Military analysts agree. In a full-scale regional war involving Iran, Hezbollah, Syria, and other actors, Jerusalem becomes the symbolic prize. Both sides would fight for control. The Temple Mount would sit in the crossfire. Iran has stated its goal openly. Supreme Leader Khamenei declared in 2020, Israel won't exist in 25 years. Jerusalem will be liberated. Iranian-backed militias in Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq have positioned over 150,000 rockets aimed at Israeli territory. Turkey dreams of restoring its influence over Jerusalem, which it controlled during the Ottoman Empire until 1917. Erdogan has called for Islamic nations to unite against Israeli occupation of Al-Aqsa. Russia seeks control over energy corridors and Mediterranean ports. Its alliance with Iran and Syria gives it strategic depth in the region. Moscow has quietly opposed Israeli sovereignty over Jerusalem in UN votes. All three powers have conflicting long-term interests, but they share one short-term goal: diminishing American and Israeli influence in the Middle East. And prophecy watchers see another layer. Ezekiel 38 describes God supernaturally intervening in this invasion. Fire from heaven, confusion among the armies, complete destruction of the attacking forces. What if that divine intervention includes the Temple Mount? Rabbi Yisrael Ariel said, "When the Creator decides to rebuild his house, he will remove obstacles in ways men call war or disaster. But in heaven, it's the fulfillment of his plan." In this scenario, a missile hits the dome of the rock during a massive regional conflict. The world sees it as a tragic accident of war, a stray munition, collateral damage in urban combat. Israel denies responsibility. Investigations prove inconclusive. International outrage erupts, but the building is gone. And while diplomats argue about who fired the missile, another possibility emerges. One that doesn't require earthquakes or wars. One involving a leader who promises to solve the impossible problem. A peacemaker the world will celebrate until they realize what he actually is. Daniel 9:27 contains one of the most debated prophecies in the Bible. He will confirm a covenant with many for 1/7. In the middle of the 7, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering. Bible scholars call this the 7-year tribulation period, and it begins with a treaty, not a war, a peace agreement. The prophecy describes a leader who accomplishes what generations of diplomats couldn't. He brokers a deal between Israel and its enemies. He solves the Jerusalem problem. He opens the Temple Mount. The world will call him a genius, a unifier, the greatest peacemaker in history. Theologian Charles Ryrie explained, "The Antichrist presents himself as humanity's savior. He does the impossible. He reconciles ancient enemies and makes the temple possible." Here's how it could unfold. After a devastating regional conflict, or a major earthquake, or both, the international community demands a permanent solution. The UN convenes an emergency session. World powers appoint a special mediator, someone charismatic, brilliant, trusted by all sides. This leader proposes something revolutionary: turn the Temple Mount into an interfaith zone, a symbol of coexistence. Jews can rebuild their temple on one section. Muslims keep their holy sites on another. Jerusalem becomes a shared capital under international supervision. To skeptics, it sounds impossible, but he has leverage. He controls reconstruction funding. He's negotiated security guarantees from major powers. He's convinced Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and other Muslim nations to support the plan. Israel sees an opportunity they've waited 2,000 years for. They accept. The temple construction begins. Rabbis declare it a miracle. Media coverage is overwhelmingly positive. This leader appears on every news channel, hailed as the architect of Middle East peace. For 3.5 years, everything seems perfect. Then comes the betrayal. Daniel's prophecy continues. In the middle of the 7, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering. Halfway through the 7-year agreement, this leader reveals his true nature. He doesn't just want peace, he wants worship. 2 Thessalonians 2:4 describes what happens next. He will oppose and exalt himself over everything called God, setting himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. The temple that was built under his authority becomes his throne. The sacrifices stop. The deception is complete. Isaiah 28:15 called this a covenant with death. The verse warns, "We have made lies our refuge and hidden ourselves under falsehood." Israel thought they were getting their temple. Instead, they enabled the greatest deception in human history. But here's what most people miss. This scenario doesn't require the temple to be built first. The leader's peace deal is what makes construction possible, which means someone, somewhere, is already preparing to make that offer, and everything they'll need to fulfill it already exists. While the world debates politics, something extraordinary is happening in Jerusalem. Everything needed to rebuild the temple already exists. The Temple Institute, founded in 1987, has spent decades recreating every item described in the Torah. Not replicas for museums, actual functioning sacred objects built to exact biblical specifications. The golden menorah stands ready, 7 branches, pure gold, weighing over 90 pounds, cost approximately $2 million. It matches the measurements given to Moses on Mount Sinai down to the millimeter. The high priest's garments have been sewn. The breastplate contains 12 precious stones representing the tribes of Israel. The gold crown engraved with "Holy to the Lord" sits in a secured location. The altar of incense, the table of showbread, the copper laver, the silver trumpets, the vessels for sacrifices, all completed. Rabbi Chaim Richman stated in 2024, "We have everything required to begin temple service today. The only thing missing is access to the mountain." But the most critical element involves living animals. Jewish law requires a red heifer for purification rituals before temple service can begin. Not just any red cow, a perfect specimen without a single hair of another color. It must be 3 years old and never used for labor. For centuries, such animals were considered extinct or impossible to find. In 2022, 5 red heifers were transported from a ranch in Texas to Israel. They were raised under rabbinical supervision, examined regularly for any disqualifying marks. In September 2024, reports indicated at least 2 of these heifers met all requirements and reached the proper age. Rabbi Azariah Ariel, head of a Temple Mount organization, announced, "When the perfect heifer is sacrificed, nothing can prevent what comes next. That will be the point of no return." The ashes from this sacrifice would be used to purify the priests, the utensils, and eventually the Temple Mount itself. Beyond objects, the people are ready. Over 600 men have been identified as Kohanim, descendants of Aaron, through genetic testing and genealogical records. They've undergone training in sacrificial procedures. They practice the ancient rituals during Passover each year. The Levites, who assist the priests, have studied the songs and ceremonies described in Leviticus. Musicians have recreated instruments from biblical descriptions. The shofars are ready to blow. Israeli architect Shmuel Balzam completed detailed construction plans showing how the third temple would fit on the Temple Mount. The blueprints account for every chamber, every measurement, every requirement. Stones cut to specification sit in storage. Materials have been gathered. Construction teams have been briefed. Rabbi Shmuel Eliyahu, chief rabbi of Safed, said in 2023, "Israel didn't return to this land for politics. We returned to rebuild the house of God. Everything else is preparation for that moment. The command hasn't been given, but when it comes, construction could begin within days." Here's what makes this moment unique in history. All 3 scenarios could converge into one event. Imagine this sequence. Regional tensions escalate into open war. During the conflict, a major earthquake strikes Jerusalem. The Al-Aqsa Mosque sustains catastrophic damage or collapses entirely. Israel can't be blamed for either event. Nature and war created the opening. Then the peacemaker appears. He offers the solution: international funding for reconstruction, security guarantees, a shared sacred space, the deal that makes everyone happy. And construction begins immediately because everything is already prepared. This isn't speculation about some distant future. The pieces are positioned right now. Iran continues uranium enrichment despite sanctions. Russia maintains its Syrian bases. Turkey increases its rhetoric about Jerusalem. Seismic activity continues along the fault line. The red heifers are the right age. The temple items sit in warehouses. Dr. John Walvoord wrote, "When the temple is ready, and only the authorization is missing, we are at the threshold of prophetic fulfillment." But there's something else happening that connects all of this. The acceleration. Events that used to take decades now happen in months. Israel became a nation in 1948. Jerusalem came under Israeli control in 1967. The Temple movement gained momentum in the 1980s. Genetic testing identified the priests in the 2000s. The red heifers arrived in 2022. Each milestone came faster than the previous one. Rabbi Yisrael Ariel said, "This generation will see the temple. No generation has been as prepared as ours." Global geopolitics, ancient prophecy, modern technology, and religious fervor are converging on 35 acres in Jerusalem. The stage is set. The actors are in position. The script was written thousands of years ago. And there's one more thing most people don't know about what's already happened on that mountain. In March 2024, Israeli authorities quietly approved infrastructure upgrades around the Temple Mount. Water lines, electrical systems, foundation reinforcement for future construction. The permits were filed under routine municipal maintenance, but engineers who reviewed the documents noticed something. The specifications match requirements for supporting a massive stone structure, not a mosque, a temple. The approvals went through without international media coverage. No protests, no UN resolutions, just paperwork processed in a municipal office. When asked about the permits, a spokesman for the Jerusalem Development Authority said, "We prepare infrastructure for various scenarios." The same month, a delegation of evangelical leaders met privately with Temple Institute officials. The topic of that meeting has never been disclosed.